This was the most controversial commencement speech delivered during my 14 years at Smith College so far. And Rachel Maddow is delivering the one in May, so I doubt that one will go down badly. Understanding that all women still struggle to live real lives, juggling competing demands and desires, Smith has launched the Center for Work and Life. With the goal of helping students imagine and prepare for a rewarding life, the center brings together Smith's programming on wellness, leadership development, and career preparation. We also know that, like the rest of us, students are overbooked and very stressed. A signature program of the center, the one that Jessica Nickel named, the Women's Narratives Project, aims to help students develop a habit of reflection about their priorities, values, and ambitions, and to help them disentangle external expectations for them from their own choices about their own lives. Of course, we all know that these questions follow us for a lifetime. That today's symposium attracted nearly 500 participants is evidence enough. We also know that powerful social change often begins when women talk to each other. We hope that you will find inspiration, sustenance, and renewed energy in the next 2 days to find better ways to allow women to be who they are in a world that supports their pursuits. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce Ellen Fice, class of 2010, who will introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Ellen Fice, and I'm a studio art major and a women and gender studies minor. In particular, I am interested in forms of relational artwork, which take the form of video or photography installations. I'm currently working on a special studies, partially about the techniques of interviewing. Approaching my graduation this May, considering my open-ended interest in art, I find myself shying away in the face of the real world. Couldn't I just become a therapist or a social worker or an academic? Aren't these disciplines sort of similar to what I do? What if I also want to write about art or curate it? Do I have to choose? I know I'm an organizer. I'm not a painter or a sculptor. Sometimes I have doubts because I'm feeling insecure, in comparison to art more generally, but mostly in terms of its relevance in the world. What keeps me interested in art are the infrequent moments where an artist's work, or the institutional practices which make its visibility possible, become necessary to understanding the time and space we live in. Our two speakers today have upheld relevance in their work throughout their careers, in defiance of aspects of art world culture which can make any effort seem futile. It is especially bolstering for me as I consider where to go from here to research and speak about these women. Murrow Later-Manukilis's Maintenance Art Performance Series was seminal in the development of feminist institutional critique, investigating the relationships between artist and mother, labor and domesticity, and incorporating the backdrop of the museum to reference institutional power hierarchy. Hartford Wash was performed at the Wadsworth Athenaeum in 1973, punctuated by the infamous image of Euclid scrubbing the front steps, blurring any distinction between the museum and the performance. Andrea Miller-Keller began her career at the Wadsworth in 1969, where she was the founding curator of the Matrix program in 1975. Through frequently changing low-budget exhibitions, Matrix provided the venue for the public to engage with challenging works of art in an environment that fostered understanding as well as artistic development. Miller-Keller, throughout her career, has continued to flatten the line between contemporary art and the public. Through the Matrix program, Miller-Keller helped to launch the career of several generations of influential artists, including the first one-person museum shows of Janine Antoni, Barbara Kruger, Louise Lawler, Sherry Levine, Sylvia Mangold, Lorraine O'Grady, Adrian Piper, Lorna Simpson, Nancy Sparrow, Carrie Mae Weems, and Judy Baca, to name a scarce few. Both women foresaw contemporary movements years in advance. Andrea Miller-Keller helped to redefine the way in which contemporary art is exhibited, anticipating a curatorial format not critically identified until more than 20 years later. Claire Bishop describes the exhibition space of the 1990s in Antagonism and Relational Aesthetics as one which reconceptualizes the white cube model of displaying contemporary art as a studio or contemporary laboratory, using metaphors like construction site, art factory to differentiate themselves from bureaucracy-encumbered museums, to better exhibit work that is open-ended, interactive, and resistant to closure. The Matrix program was the precedent for these types of spaces. Matrix has inspired more than 50 programs across the country. Art on the Edge at the High Museum of Art, Directions at the Hirshhorn, Investigations at the Institute of Contemporary Art, University of Pennsylvania, and Options at the Museum of Contemporary Art, Chicago are a few examples of Matrix's direct influence. Matrix's emphasis on demystifying contemporary art also spawned the program's lecture series, drawing crowds of hundreds of people to see artists, such as the elusive Guerrilla Girls, discuss their work. Merle Laterman Ukeles engaged in a collaborative practice before there was a term for it. Works like Touch Sanitation and Fresh Kills Landfill involve the community or benefit the community without jeopardizing artistic complexity. Her projects with the New York City Department of Sanitation, where she has been the artist in residence since 1977, discuss issues of global environmental management, especially illuminating the relationship between local and global environmental policy. I am excited to witness a conversation between two women who have continually fostered dialogue throughout their careers. Please join me in welcoming them to Smith.
Hi. On behalf of all the panelists, I want to thank President Chris for hosting a lovely luncheon. I want to thank Jessica and Dean Mahoney. And I also want to thank Tyga Ermanson and Louise Krieger, because they've all worked really, really hard for all the very little details to fall very gently into place. And thank you, Ellen. Thank you. For such a thoughtful and carefully researched introduction. Here's how Meryl and I have structured our time with you. I promised the organizers that I would offer you, okay, thank you, that I would offer you a quick synopsis of my 3+ decades as a curator of contemporary art before we dive headlong into Meryl's remarkable work. Because the topic of this symposium is real lives, I'm going to put an unusually personal and candid and decidedly feminist slant on what I share with you. Then Meryl is going to attempt the impossible. She is going to take 25 minutes to share with you a PowerPoint presentation covering her entire career. And this is because we both wanted to make sure that everyone in the audience had a grasp of her work. The perfect lead into our conversation, which will follow for maybe about 25 minutes or so. And we hope to leave time for questions, but if we don't manage to do that, please do feel free to come and talk with us individually, because we're both going to be around all of the events the next day or two. I want to share with you at the opening of this symposium something about the climate into which most of us participating in this 2-day program first emerged professionally. So I'm going to talk with you mostly about days long ago. I arrived at Radcliffe College from sunny Southern California in 1959, the first member of my family to have the privilege of going to college. 1960 was the year that Kennedy was elected. Cambridge was then a very heady place with professors like Henry Kissinger and McGeorge Bundy and Arthur Schlesinger. I majored in international relations, which, by the way, was exactly what Meryl was already majoring in at Barnard 2 years ahead of me. I felt so lucky to be able to attend classes at Harvard, no matter that we Cliffies lived a mile away in separate dorms and had to bring along a brown bag lunch if we wanted to stay the full day on campus, we all knew that Harvard Yard offered very few available ladies' restrooms, and because they were of importance, we knew where they were. I read weekly to a blind student in the all-male Lamont Library, but I had to enter the library surreptitiously through a backdoor basement door. And I was warned ahead of time that I would not have access to any bathroom facilities. Only decades later did it dawn on me that they must have had plenty of female librarians working really hard in that building, and therefore there must have been some facilities that offered a ladies' restroom. In short, Harvard was not hospitable to women. In my junior year, I took my first art history course in mid-19th century to early 20th century art, and I mention this because the young professor, who was very good, was Charles Chatham, a man who later became the director of the Smith College Museum of Art. Several years after graduating, I started to work on a master's degree in art history at Columbia, having finished all the coursework and passed the language exams in both French and German, and the comprehensive. I had only to write my thesis on the development of curved surfaces in the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. My advisor was Edgar Kaufman, Jr., who in the early 1930s prevailed upon his wealthy parents to commission Wright to build them a vacation retreat in Pennsylvania, known to you all as Falling Water. I was by then living in Hartford, Connecticut, having cheerfully followed my husband to his great new job, and I was delighted to be newly pregnant. Unexpectedly, I had some trouble in my early pregnancy, could not travel down to Columbia, applied for a medical extension on the deadline for my thesis, and was turned down. During the same period, Columbia was routinely granting extensions to young men who were called up to defend the Berlin Wall. I should have been outraged, but I was not. The happiest part of this tale is my firstborn daughter, Alexandra Keller, whom a number of you probably know as the head of the film department here at Smith. And I can tell you, she really knows her stuff. And based on what I've heard from others, she's also a very wonderful teacher. My work at the Wadsworth Atheneum began in 1969, where I became both a writer of grant applications and a researcher compiling the first country-by-country checklists of their distinguished European collections. Jim Elliott, the director of the Wadsworth Atheneum, was very attuned to recent developments in contemporary art, such as pop art, conceptual art, performance art, and even feminist art. Back at that time, most traditional art museums had a very uneasy relationship to new work, if any relationship at all. Their focus was almost exclusively on the past. We proposed that Matrix, if funded and operational, would be a useful prototype for other museums that might also want to exhibit cutting-edge art on a modest scale and with a very un-museum-like short lead time. We received the grant. I was appointed coordinator of Matrix, and in 1975, Matrix opened to the public with 3 small exhibitions, each with its own separate little publication, featuring Ellsworth Kelly, the San Francisco artist Jess, and a beautiful but mystifying wall drawing by Saul LeWitt. 6 months later, Jim Elliott announced that he was leaving the Wadsworth Atheneum to become the director of Berkeley's University Art Museum. As Jim prepared for his departure to Berkeley, the running of Matrix fell to me by default.